What is up, guys? My name is PocketCraft and welcome back to the channel. I've spent the last 100 days answering all of your Cobblemon questions. I've compiled all of the answers into this video so you can have an easy way to access all 100 of these tips and tricks. If you love Cobblemon and you want to get the most out of it, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of my updates, and make sure to stick around to the end of this video because I saved some of the best tips for last. Thank you for spending an incredible 100 days with me.
XRazor5 asked what Pokemon are good for Ender Pearls. If you're able to make it to the end, I would say Elgyem and Beldum are your best bet for getting Ender Pearls. They are two of the only Pokemon that spawn in the end, and so you'll be able to encounter a ton of them very easily. However, if you're looking for Ender Pearls, you may not have been able to make it to the end by now. In that case, Pokemon like Abra and Ralts also drop Ender Pearls. Abra is a common spawn in the overworld, and so that's a great Pokemon to work with, and you'll just have to try and hunt down as many as you can. Asher asked where to find Pokérod templates and can you fish for them? Yes, you can fish for them, but there's a much easier way. If you level up a fisherman villager to his master level, you can trade emeralds for Pokérod templates. Mural asked what Pokemon are good for Blaze Rods. There are two main Pokemon I recommend for getting Blaze Powder or Blaze Rods in Cobblemon. The first is Ponyta. Ponyta spawns very commonly in plains biomes and in the Nether, and it has a chance to drop Blaze Powder when you knock it out. The other great option is Magmar, who spawns in the Nether and also drops Blaze Powder when you knock it out. With Magmar and Ponyta both spawning in the Nether, it's a great place to hunt for Blaze Powder. Uranium asked, where do I get Porygon? Porygon is a very interesting Pokemon in Cobblemon. Porygon can only spawn if it is near a PC. So the best strategy for catching a Porygon is to build several PCs and go and put them in every single chunk around your base. Build a perimeter that is about as large as the spawn radius, which should be pretty easy to tell by looking at a mini-map. At that point, Porygon is only an uncommon spawn, so if you build enough PCs, it shouldn't be too hard to find one. Ethan asked, how do I get a Nether Star with mob spawns off? In order to get a Nether Star, you'll need to use an extra mod because it's not available in vanilla Cobblemon. I recommend the Pokemans mod. Then, once that mod is downloaded, you need to hunt for a Groudon, which spawns in the Badlands biomes. Then you need to knock out Groudon, and when you knock out Groudon, he will drop a Nether Star. Fetty asked, what's a good way to get revival herbs? The best way to find revival herbs are in lush cave biomes, and they will be growing like this. You can harvest them by clicking on them, and you'll get a revival herb and pep up flowers. Once you've harvested one revival herb, you can just farm them like any other plant in Minecraft, and you can use bone meal to make them grow more quickly. Lucky asked, can we get shinies in the game, and how do you increase the chance of finding one? You can absolutely get shiny Pokemon in Cobblemon, and there are three main ways to increase the odds. If you hold a Starf Berry in your offhand while you are fishing, it will double the chance that you will catch a shiny Pokemon. Now this method works, but it's pretty slow, and obviously you can only get Pokemon that you can catch from fishing. So the next method is far more effective. If you open up your games folder and click on the config file, and then the Cobblemon file, and then main.json, it will pull up this scary looking code, but if you just scroll down, you can see the shiny rate here, which the default is 1 out of 8,192. So then you can change the shiny rate to whatever you want it to be. Now I recommend not putting it too low because you still want shinies to be rare, but since there's no shiny charm in Cobblemon, you can make this like a shiny charm and create a goal like whenever you finish the Pokedex, beat a certain number of gym leaders, or accomplish anything else, you can lower the shiny rate to make it more common like you would if you obtain a shiny charm in the normal games. And now the final main way to get a shiny Pokemon in Cobblemon is the Do Shiny Starters command. Masha asks, what happens if you dye a shiny Wooloo's wool, and can Dubwool be sheared? If you dye a shiny Wooloo, its color will change, but it will still be slightly different than a normal dyed Wooloo, in that its face and feet will be white. It will still drop the same color wool as a normal Wooloo. That's actually the same for an undyed Wooloo as well. It will just drop white wool rather than the color of its shiny wool, which is a little bit lame. As far as Dubwool goes, you can shear Dubwool, but it will just give you the same amount that you would get from shearing a normal Wooloo. But unfortunately, you can't dye Dubwool. The Real asked, how do you get Master Balls? Master Balls are one of the most expensive items in Cobblemon. You can craft them using a Nether Star, 2 Netherite ingots, and 2 Shulker shells. Nerva asked, is there any Pokemon that drops Gas Tears? There's actually a very common Pokemon that drops Gas Tears in Cobblemon. The Ghastly line is a common spawn in the Nether, as well as in the overworld when it is dark. When you knock Ghastly out, there is a chance that it will drop a Gas Tear. So if you just hunt around in the Nether for long enough, you should be able to find one pretty easily. Ethan asked, how do I get shiny fossil Pokemon? Many people think that the only way to get fossils is through the restoration machine. While this is the most common way, it's probably not optimal for shiny hunting. However, every fossil Pokemon also spawns as an ultra rare spawn in the lush cave biomes. So if you want a shiny fossil Pokemon, it's going to be very rare, but I would recommend spending a lot of time in a lush cave biome and then following my tips from day 7 of this series. Hydro asked, how do I get Rayquaza, Groudon, and Kyogre? In order to get these Pokemon, you'll need an extra mod because they don't spawn in vanilla Cobblemon. I'm currently using the Pokemans mod, and I'll include a link in the description. In this mod, Groudon spawns in Badlands biomes when it is not raining. Then Kyogre spawns in deep ocean biomes when it is raining. Rayquaza spawns in Sunflower Plains biomes during the day. Arshkana asked how to get Primal Kyogre and Groudon in Cobblemon. If you're using the Pokemon's data pack, there are certain items you can use to evolve Kyogre and Groudon into their primal forms. If you give Groudon a Nether Star to hold, then you can evolve it into its primal form. The really cool thing is that it will still include the normal vanilla Cobblemon evolution animation, and then it will turn into Primal Groudon. It looks a little bit like a Power Rangers robot to me, but it still looks really cool. If you give Kyogre a Heart of the Sea to hold, then you will be able to evolve it into Primal Kyogre, which looks absolutely epic swimming on the water here. Nidoking Fan asked, how can I get Regigigas and the Regi Trio? First, you want to make sure you have the Mystic Mons data pack installed. Then Regigigas spawns in Stony Peak biomes. Registeel spawns in Jagged Peak biomes. Regirock spawns in the desert. And then for some reason, it actually doesn't have a spawn location for Regice. Not totally sure why you can catch the rest of the Regis, but not Regice. But I guess that's just how it is for now. Jacob asked, how do I get Arceus? First, you need to make sure you have the Pokemon's data pack installed. Then once you do, Arceus is an ultra rare spawn in the end. Now, normally ultra rare spawns are really hard to find, but there are actually very few Pokemon that spawn in the end, which should make him slightly easier to find than some of the other legendary Pokemon. And just like the normal Pokemon games, you can change his type by giving him gems to hold. And it'll bring up the option to evolve Arceus, and he will evolve into whatever form of Arceus correlates with the gem you gave him. The Great Hamster asked, how do I get Ditto in Cobblemon? Ditto can actually spawn anywhere in the overworld, so he shouldn't be too hard to find. However, he is more of a rare spawn, so it still might take you a little bit. But I still highly recommend hunting for Ditto, because if you install the Cobb breeding mod and place a Ditto with another Pokemon in a pasture block, you can breed eggs of that Pokemon. And just like in the normal Pokemon games, this can be used to get perfect IV Pokemon or shinies. Pizza Ghoul asked how to get Giratina in Cobblemon. First, you need to make sure you have the Pokemon's data pack installed. Once you have the pack installed, Giratina is an ultra rare spawn in the Nether Wastes biome, so you'll have to hunt for him in one of those. In order to do this, you may want to set up some sort of satellite base in the Nether. Wolfix asked how to get Giratina, Dialga, and Palkia in Cobblemon. First, you need to make sure you have the Pokemon's data pack installed. Once you do, Dialga is an ultra rare spawn in the end. Palkia is also an ultra rare spawn in the end, so if you want one of these guys, I would highly recommend raiding end cities or creating some sort of satellite base in the end, and you should be able to find one. And then I actually answered someone else's question about Giratina yesterday, but he spawns in the Nether Waste biome. Derek asked, how can I get Necrozma in Cobblemon? First, you need to make sure you have the Mystic Mons data pack installed. Then Necrozma is an ultra rare spawn in the end and in dark forests at night. Akappa asked how to get and evolve Kubfu in Cobblemon. First, you need to make sure you have the Pokemon's data pack enabled. Then Kubfu is an ultra rare spawn in cherry forest biomes. And look at him anime run, it's awesome. Then supposedly if you give Kubfu a muscle band to hold, it will evolve into single strike form, and if you give it an expert belt to hold, it should evolve into rapid strike form. That's what the mod page says, but unfortunately that hasn't worked for me. So there's maybe a bug where you can't evolve Kubfu, but feel free to try it out, and maybe in a cherry grove biome it'll work. Kendrick asked how to evolve a Farfetch'd in Cobblemon. This is definitely one of the more difficult evolutions in Cobblemon. You need your Galarian Farfetch'd to land 3 critical hits and a single battle. Now this is obviously pretty difficult, but there are some ways to make it easier. If you give a Galarian Farfetch'd a medicinal leak to hold, this will increase its chance to land a critical hit. Medicinal leaks can be found easily growing on bodies of water, but 3 critical hits in one battle is still a lot. If you're playing in a multiplayer server or with mods like the Radical Red mod that add trainers, it's a little bit easier in a trainer battle. But if you're just in single player, I recommend finding a really bulky Pokemon that doesn't do a lot of damage, like a Blissey, and then attacking it with a low powered move over and over again so you don't knock it out. Blissey is also nice because it will heal itself, although it is very rare. So battle something like this and go over and over again until you get 3 critical hits, and then you need to make sure that you live the battle. The Zonker asked, how do I get Zacian and Zamazenta in Cobblemon? First, you need to make sure you have the Pokemon's data pack enabled. Then they are both actually ultra rare spawns in forest biomes. Jack asked, how do I get Eternatus in Cobblemon? First, you need to make sure you have the Pokemon's data pack enabled. Once that's enabled, Eternatus is a ultra rare spawn in the end. So I'd recommend hunting for end cities, and at some point he should spawn in. second. Shay asked, how do I get Lunala and Cobblemon? First, you need to make sure you have the Mystic Mons data pack enabled. Then Lunala is simply an ultra rare spawn in the end and in dark forests at night. I think the most productive way to hunt for one would be to hunt for end cities and frequently check your minimap as you go. Logan asked, can Gimmighoul be shiny and how can you get them? Yes, you can. Shiny Gimmighoul looks like this in the game, and there's a couple ways to find them. Gimmighoul like this without the chest spawn pretty commonly throughout most of the overworld, but Cobblemon also has Gimmighoul towers which look like this and are pretty common. If you walk around for a few hundred blocks, you'll find them pretty easily. And at the top of Gimmighoul towers, you'll see a chest like this, and if you interact with it, you'll see that it is a Gimmighoul Pokemon that you can then catch or battle. And then as far as shiny hunting Gimmighoul, you'll do it just like any other Pokemon. And if you don't know how to do that, check out the playlist for this 100-day series, and I have a guide on how to shiny hunt. Charlie asked how to get the Kanto starters in Cobblemon. Bulbasaur is an ultra rare spawn in jungle biomes, so I'd recommend going to a jungle biome and harvesting wood or training up your Pokemon to bide some time while you wait for one to spawn. Squirtle's a little bit trickier. It's an ultra rare spawn near fresh water, so you can find it in freshwater biomes. I usually find looking near rivers works best. So you can fish by a river and check your minimap while you wait. I recommend using the PokéNav add-on so that you can make sure you're in the right biome. Or probably more fun, you could build a base near the river, like one of my Pokemon centers, which I'll link the build tutorial below. Charmander's probably the hardest of the three to find, and it's an ultra rare spawn in hill biomes, as well as in nether basalt biomes. Iran asked how to get Giratina origin form in Cobblemon. First, you need to make sure you have the Pokemon's data pack enabled. Then obviously you'll need to catch a Giratina, which spawns in the nether. Then, if you give Giratina a Dawn Stone to hold, you can evolve it into its origin form. Now, the evolution animation will take a second, and this probably isn't the best area to see it, because we're surrounded by trees. But I think the origin form actually looks really cool in Cobblemon. I'm not a huge fan of the other form, but this design looks sick. Joe Batman asked, how can you ride Rayquaza in Cobblemon? This is a tricky one, so you're going to want to pay close attention, but it's definitely worth it because this actually works with any Pokemon. First, you need to make sure you have the Cobblemon Rider mod enabled, and you obviously need a Rayquaza. Then you need to open up your Minecraft folder, click on the saves file, click on whatever world you're playing, so for me that's tutorials, then click on Pokemon Rider config.json. Now this is going to look pretty intimidating, but it's actually fairly simple. I would recommend scrolling down to Dragonite or any other flying Pokemon. Then what you want to do is just copy everything for Dragonite, so that's going to be from the quotation mark here to the comma here, and then paste it right below. Then you just need to change Dragonite to Rayquaza. Now this will allow us to fly on Rayquaza, but the offset here is going to be related to Dragonite. So you'll want to fiddle around with this until it looks natural. So just changing the name to Rayquaza will enable us to ride Rayquaza. You just need to shift and right click on Rayquaza and then click on mount. This allows you to ride Rayquaza, but it'll look really derpy until you correctly change the offset. And you can just play around with numbers until it looks right. You can use the same strategy to ride on any Pokemon in Cobblemon. Dennis asks, how can I find Latias or Latios in Cobblemon? First, you need to make sure you have the Pokemon's data pack enabled. Then both of these Pokemon are ultra rare spawns in plains biomes. With this being one of the most common biomes to build a base in, this actually makes them easier to find than most legendary Pokemon. Isaac asks, how can I get Hoopa in Cobblemon? First, you need to make sure you have the Pokemon's data pack enabled. Then Hoopa is an ultra rare spawn in the end. If you give Hoopa an Eye of Ender to hold, then you can evolve it into Hoopa Unbound form, which looks absolutely incredible and definitely one of the coolest Pokemon forms in Cobblemon. This is also probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest Pokemon in Cobblemon, so definitely a must-have on your team. Panda Bear asked, how can I get Silvally and Type Null in Cobblemon? First, you need to have the Pokemon's data pack enabled. Then, Type Null is an ultra rare spawn in plains biomes. To evolve Type Null into Silvally, you need to max out its friendship. This can be done by catching it in a friend ball and walking it around, or more simply, feeding it several tomato berries or any of the other EV berries. Once friendship reaches the max level, you can easily evolve it into Silvally. Then if you want to change its form, you can give it type gems to hold, and then you can easily evolve it into whatever type you would like, similar to how you can evolve Arceus in Cobblemon. So for example, this is what electric type Silvally looks like. Leonard asked how to get Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem in Cobblemon. First, you need to have the Pokemon's data pack installed. Then Reshiram spawns in mountain biomes when it is not raining. Zekrom spawns in mountain biomes when it is thundering, which makes him a little bit harder to find, but both of them are ultra rare spawns. And then Kyurem is an ultra rare spawn in ice spike biomes when it is snowing. MJ Tubers asked, how do you get Solgaleo in Cobblemon? First, you need to have have the Mystic Mons data pack enabled. Then Solgaleo is an ultra rare spawn in Savannah and Badlands biomes in the mornings. Geography Good asked how to use the fossil machine in Cobblemon. There are 3 main parts to the fossil machine in Cobblemon. First, you need the restoration tank, which takes iron, glass, a revive, and a composter. Then you need the data monitor, which takes iron, copper, glass, and a redstone torch. And then finally, you need the fossil analyzer, which takes cobbled deep slate, iron, glass, an amethyst shard, and redstone. Then it's vital you place these in the right order or it won't work. You want the fossil analyzer on the bottom left with the data monitor on top, and then the restoration tank to the right of it. Then you right click the fossil analyzer with a fossil in your hand, and then all you need to do is fill the restoration tank with any organic material. So you can use leaves, berries, crops, milk, all sorts of different items, but max revive is by far the most effective, only taking 2 to fill it up completely. Then you just wait about 10 minutes until it's finished with its process, and you can right click it for your fossil Pokemon. Joseph asked, how do you get Marshadow in Cobblemon? First, you need to have the Mystic Mons data pack enabled. Then Marshadow is an ultra rare spawn in the deep dark biomes. So if you're playing with Minecraft mobs enabled, you'll have to be very careful while hunting for Marshadow. Hectoraptor asked how to get Cosmog in Cobblemon. First, you need to have the Mystic Mons data pack enabled. Then Cosmog is an ultra rare spawn in floral biomes, and it definitely has one of the cutest animations in all of Cobblemon. Then at level 43, you can evolve it into Cosmoem, who's got a bit of a derpy face. And then once you get it to level 53, you have the choice of evolving it into either Solgaleo or Lunala, and the game just allows you to pick whichever one you want. Linz McBride asked how to get Ultra Beasts in Cobblemon. First, you need to have the Mystic Mons data pack enabled. Then they are all ultra rare spawns, with Buzzwole spawning in swamp biomes. Pheromosa actually spawns in plains biomes, but it also spawns in the end, and I would recommend hunting for it there because there's a lower spawn pool, so you have a better chance of finding one. Stakataga similarly spawns in plains biomes, as well as some other common biomes like the desert, but again, I would recommend hunting for it in the end. Then my personal favorite, Guzzlord, who has got to be the biggest model in all of Cobblemon, I think even beating out Wailord, spawns in swamp biomes, but it also spawns in the end, and again, I think it's going to be easier to find one there. So for the majority of Ultra Beasts, I'd recommend hunting in the end. Mystic Creeps asked how to get Deoxys in Cobblemon. First, you need to have the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Deoxys is an ultra rare spawn in the end, but it will only spawn in its normal form, so if you want to change its form, you'll need certain items. If you right click Deoxys with an end crystal, then you can evolve it into its attack form, which will look just like this in Cobblemon. If you right click Deoxys with a Shulker shell, then you can evolve it into its defense form, which looks a little bit derpy but still pretty fun. And if you want to change any of these Deoxys back to their normal form, you just need to right click it with an end stone, and then interestingly enough, it will still have you actually click the evolve button, but the evolve button is going to turn it back into the normal form of Deoxys rather than whatever form it was previously. And then according to the wiki, you need to right click Deoxys with Chorus Fruit to evolve into its speed form, but I haven't figured out a way to do that because my player just ends up wanting to eat it. Your Simp asked how to get Meltan in Cobblemon. First, you need to make sure the All the Mons Cobblemon data pack is enabled. This is my new favorite data pack that adds a ton of legendaries. In this data pack, in lukewarm ocean biomes, an Alolan cargo ship can spawn. And on these ships, you have the chance to summon Meltan, and I think the model they gave him is incredible. And then if you get Meltan to level 70 and give it an anvil to hold, then you have the ability to evolve it into Melmetal. And I love how tiny the evolution animation is before this hulking guy comes out. And look at the way he walks. I think that's incredible. Vic asked how to get Zygarde in Cobblemon. First, you need to have the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then there are actually several different forms of Zygarde in Cobblemon. And this adorable little guy is Zygarde 1% form. It spawns below Y level 0 and it is an ultra rare spawn. If you get it above level 10 and right click it with a slime block, then you're able to evolve it into the Zygarde 10% form. And as far as I know, I don't think this is reversible. Then if you get the 10% form to level 50 or higher, and right click it with the slime block, you can evolve it into Zygarde 50% form, which is just the original Zygarde from the games. This also spawns naturally as an ultra rare spawn very deep underground. You have to look below Y level 32. But if you get this Pokemon to level 100 and right click it with a slime block, then you can evolve it into the Pokemon probably all of you are looking for, and that is Zygarde complete form, who looks like a freaking Power Rangers robot. And I don't believe this Pokemon spawns naturally. You have to evolve it from one of the earlier forms. Item Guen asked how to get Lugia in Cobblemon. First, you need to have the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Lugia is an ultra rare spawn near ocean monuments, so you're definitely going to want to have some potions of water breathing in order to hunt one, but it's definitely worth it because this model is awesome. Dane asked how to get Ho-Oh in Cobblemon. First, you need to have the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Ho-Oh is an ultra rare spawn in Sunflower Plains biomes, and it only spawns during the day. LG Superstar asked, how do you get Darkrai in Cobblemon? First, you need to have the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Darkrai is an ultra rare spawn in the Deep Dark. This is one of the most dangerous biomes in Minecraft, so if you have mobs enabled, you'll want to make sure you're well prepared before you go. Dexon asked, how to get Mew in Cobblemon? First, you need the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Mew is an ultra rare spawn in jungle or floral biomes. Abobus asked how to get Miraidon and Koraidon in Cobblemon. First, you need to have the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Koraidon and Miraidon are both ultra rare spawns in the end. I'd recommend bringing a strong team with quick balls and timer balls as you hunt for end cities in Elytra, and that's probably your best chance of coming across one of these guys. And then if you want to ride on one of them, it won't be like the motorcycle forms in the game, but you can use the Cobblemon Rider mod, and I'll link a tutorial below on how you can change the config files so you can ride on these guys. JR Palm asked, how do you get the legendary dogs in Cobblemon? The first thing you'll need to do is have the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then you would expect each of these Pokemon to spawn in different biomes, but actually these are some of the easier legendaries to come by because Raikou, Entei, and Suicune are all ultra rare spawns anywhere in the overworld in Cobblemon. But wait, if you're anything like me, you probably want to ride on these guys once you've caught them. Renedoxis asked how to get Ultra Necrozma in Cobblemon. First, you need to have the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then you need Lunala, Solgaleo, and normal Necrozma in your party. Next, you'll need to make sure you have at least 3 diamonds, making this a pretty expensive Pokemon. You right-click Necrozma with these 3 diamonds, and then you have the option to evolve it into Ultra Necrozma, which looks like this. Absolutely massive and looks like a Yu-Gi-Oh character. Online Comments asked how to get Zeraora in Cobblemon. First, you need to have the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Zeraora is an ultra rare spawn in desert biomes. There are other legendaries that spawn in the desert, but Zeraora and Moltres have the highest spawn rates here, meaning you have a pretty good chance to catch this guy. Isa asked where to find Yveltal in Cobblemon. First, you need to have the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then you need to wait until it's nighttime. Then Yveltal is an ultra rare spawn in forest biomes at night. Ice Games asked how to get Magearna in Cobblemon. First, you need to have the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Magearna is an ultra rare spawn in floral biomes, and I think this model looks incredible. The detail is really impressive. Kurokate asked how to get Diancie in Cobblemon. First, you need to have the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Diancie is a bit of an interesting one. You have to be below Y level 30 and below light level 7, but Diancie will not spawn in lush caves or deep dark biomes. So the best strategy for coming across Diancie is just to go caving and avoid those specific biomes that I mentioned, and make sure you don't put too much light down here. Chewy asked, how can I get Terapagos in Cobblemon? First, you need to have the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Terapagos actually has the same spawn conditions as Diancie, and so these are great Pokemon to hunt together. Both these Pokemon spawn below Y level 30 and below light level 7, with the exception of lush cave and deep dark biomes. So the best way to find them is go caving, avoid placing too many torches, and just make sure you aren't in a lush cave or deep dark biome. Hero asked, how do you get Keldeo in Cobblemon? First, you need to have the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Keldeo is an ultra rare spawn in swamp biomes, but Keldeo also has its special resolute form. You want to see this form, you need to right click Keldeo with a diamond sword. Then an option will appear for you to be able to evolve Keldeo, and when you do, it will evolve into its resolute form with his big ol' unicorn horn coming out the front. Berenadex asked, how do I get Heatran in Cobblemon? First, you need to have the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Heatran is an ultra rare spawn in Badlands biomes, but the developers have made it a little bit more complicated than that to catch him. Heatran won't spawn if it can see the sky, so you need to hunt for him underground, but still in a Badlands biome. And when you're hunting for Heatran, light levels have to be between 0 and 7, so you need to be careful about where you place torches. Purple Black asked how to get Chiyu in Cobblemon. First, you need to have the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Chiyu is an ultra rare spawn in Nether Wasteland and Nether Basalt biomes. The Nether can be a tricky place to hunt for Pokemon and get the right spawn conditions, so I definitely recommend bringing the Pokénav mod to help you know if you're in the right spot. Chiyu will also only spawn below Y level 127. Diff asked how to get Volcanion in Cobblemon. First, you need to make sure you have the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Volcanion is an ultra rare spawn in river biomes, but you have to make sure it has access to the sky, which shouldn't be too difficult. Most rivers are usually open to the sky. I think his model looks super sweet. This is definitely a good Pokemon to hunt, and a lot of cool starter Pokemon like Squirtle also spawn in rivers, so you'll probably find some other rare Pokemon while you're hunting. Perside asked how to get Shadow Lugia in Cobblemon. First, you need the All the Mons data pack installed. Then Lugia is an ultra rare spawn in Ocean Monuments, but if you take a dark gem and right click Lugia, it will give you the opportunity to evolve Lugia into a Shadow Lugia, which looks like this and is absolutely sick. This is the stuff of nightmares. And if you wanted to know how to ride on this Pokemon, you can click the link below. Hasty Globe asks, how do I get Shadow Mewtwo in Cobblemon? First, you need to have the Aldemon's data pack installed. Then, Shadow Mewtwo doesn't spawn in the wild, so first you need to get normal Mewtwo. To do that, you build a restoration machine like you would for fossils, and you place a Nether Star and a Psychic Gem in the machine, and then you can power it with max revives or something else. And if you give this about 10 minutes or so, it'll turn into Mewtwo. Then, once you have Mewtwo, all you need to do is right-click him with a Dark Gem, and just like Shadow Lugia, you'll get the option to evolve it into its Shadow version. And I think Shadow Mewtwo looks super awesome. It's got this like little fire shoulder thing. Freddy Garradino asks how to get Celebi in Cobblemon. First, you need to have the Aldemon's data pack enabled. Then Celebi, which looks really tiny and adorable, only spawns in forest biomes at night. So if you're playing in survival with mobs enabled, I'd recommend building some kind of shelter because it will get pretty dangerous. And Celebi is an ultra rare spawn, so it may take some time to find one. Madokichi asks, how do I get Great Tusk in Cobblemon? First, you need the Aldemon's data pack installed. Then Great Tusk is a rare spawn in any arid biome. I found the most success hunting for them in Badlands biomes, but you can find them in any other arid biome as well. However, in Badlands biomes, they're only one of the 4 rare spawns, making them a lot easier to find than in some other arid biomes. Chewy asked how to get Armored Mewtwo in Cobblemon. First, you need the Aldemon's data pack installed. However, if you're playing with Mega Showdown, this won't work because Mega Showdown and Aldemons are incompatible. But good news for you is that Aldemons just came out with a separate data pack that is compatible with Mega Showdown, and so that should help this work. Once that's installed, place a Psychic Gem and a Nether Star in a restoration tank and 2 max revives on the side or any other organic material, and in about 10 minutes this will turn into a Mewtwo. Then if you right click Mewtwo with a Steel Gem, it will give you the opportunity to evolve it into Armored Mewtwo, who looks absolutely sick. Joshua asked, what's the fastest way to get your Pokemon to level 100 in Cobblemon? First, you want to craft 5 experience shares. To craft an experience share, you need 1 gold, 1 iron helmet, 2 lapis, 2 amethyst shards, and 2 iron ingots. Then you're going to want a strong fighting type Pokemon like Machamp, Lucario, or Gallade in your party. Then give the experience share to all the other Pokemon in your party by right-clicking them until your whole party besides Machamp has one. Then if you want to speed things up even more, give your fighting type Pokemon a lucky egg. These can be found from Chansey drops. Then the most important part of this strategy is you want to be hunting in either 2 biomes. The first is to hunt in plains biomes and only fight Bouffalant and Tauros. Both of these Pokemon give a ton of XP, are usually very high level, and can be knocked out easily with a fighting type Pokemon. This allows you to ramp up experience really quickly. At one battle there, I got Larvitar from level 1 to 16. Or if you want an even better biome, go to any ice biome and focus on fighting Weirdeer, Stantler, and Piloswine. In my experience, these 2 biomes with fighting these Pokemon are the fastest way to get to level 100 in Cobblemon. No one asked, how do you get Dracovish in Cobblemon? First, you need the fossilized fish and fossilized Drake fossils, which can be found at different fossil sites. Then you need to build a restoration machine with a fossil analyzer, data monitor on top, and restoration tank on the side. Then you place the Drake and the fish fossil on top of each other like that. Then you need to power the machine using leaves, other organic material, or max revives. And once this is done, you can just right-click it with a Pokeball. Or Dracovish is also an ultra-rare spawn in lush cave biomes. Han asked how to get black and white Kyurem in Cobblemon. First, you need to have the Aldemon's data pack enabled. Then, obviously, you'll need a Kyurem, which is an ultra-rare spawn in glacial biomes, a Zekrom, which is an ultra-rare spawn in mountain biomes, and a Reshiram, which is an ultra-rare spawn in nether basalt biomes. Make sure that all these Pokemon are in your party, and then you can right-click Kyurem with an Echo Shard, and that will then give you the option to evolve it into white Kyurem. And so it'll evolve just like any normal evolution, and it looks pretty sweet right here. And then if you want to reverse this, you can just click it again with an Echo Shard, and then it will just evolve right back into normal Kyurem. Then if you want black Kyurem, you just right click it again. And for some reason, what I've noticed is if Zekrom and Reshiram are both in your party, you only need to right click it once for white Kyurem, and you need to right click it twice for black Kyurem. So that's a little weird, but at least it's with the same item, just an Echo Shard each time. And if you do that twice, then the option to evolve it into black Kyurem appears, who looks super sweet. Super G asks, how do you get Regidrago in Cobblemon? First, you need the Aldemon's data pack installed. Then Regidrago is an ultra rare spawn in the deep dark biomes, which is probably the most dangerous biome to hunt for Pokemon. So I highly recommend building some sort of shelter in a deep dark biome while you're trying to hunt for one. Christian asks how to get Regieleki in Cobblemon. First, you need to have the Aldemon's data pack enabled. Then Regieleki is an ultra rare spawn in plains biomes, and I think his design looks super sweet. Chewy asks how to get Genesect in Cobblemon. First, you need the Aldemon's data pack enabled. installed. Then you need to build a restoration machine like this, place a dome fossil and dubious disc in the bottom left part, and then charge it with organic material or max revives. You wait about 10 minutes, you can right click this with a Pokeball once it's done, and a Genesect will come out. Ebon Hart asked, how do you get Dawnwings, Necrozma, and Cobblemon? First you need the Aldemon's data pack enabled. Then you need to make sure you have Necrozma and Lunala both in your party. Once you do, if you right click Necrozma with a diamond, it will then have the option to evolve, and click to evolve it, and it will end up evolving into Dawnwings Necrozma, which looks super sweet in Cobblemon. Bimo asked how to get Ogerpon in Cobblemon. First, you need the Aldemon's data pack enabled. Then Ogerpon is an ultra rare spawn in lush cave biomes when the light level is below 7. Troy asked how to get Shaymin Sky Form in Cobblemon. First, you need the Aldemon's data pack installed. Then normal Shaymin spawns in floral biomes during the day. Now, once you have Shaymin, there's 2 ways to evolve it depending on whether you're using just Aldemons or also Mega Showdown. If you're just using Aldemons, you can right click Shaymin with Flowering Azalea and that will evolve it. But if you're also using Mega Showdown, then you need to right click it with the Gracidia flower, and that will immediately change it into Shaymin Sky Form. It will look super small, but super sweet. Aaron asked how to get Calyrex and the Riders in Cobblemon. First, you need to have the Aldemon's data pack enabled. Then Calyrex is an ultra rare spawn in snowy taiga biomes. To evolve it into one of its Rider forms, you'll need either Spectrier or Glastrier on your team as well. Spectrier spawns in any biome that has the spooky Cobblemon tag, while Glastrier spawns in any biome that has the Cobblemon freezing tag. You can find a list of which biomes have which tags on the Cobblemon wiki. Now the fusion method is going to change depending on if you have Mega Showdown installed. If you don't have Mega Showdown installed, all you need is to have these Pokemon in your party and then right click Calyrex with a golden helmet and you can evolve it into either one of its forms. But if you are playing with Mega Showdown, then you need the Reigns of Unity item. You first right click either Spectre or Glastrier and it'll cause them to disappear. Then you right click Calyrex and it will turn into its Rider form. If you want to remove it, you can right click it again with this item and Spectre will reappear in your party. Then you can do the same thing with Glastrier and you get the Ice Rider form. James asked how to get Snorlax in Cobblemon. There are 2 ways to get Snorlax. The first and hardest is to find a wild Snorlax, which is a pretty rare spawn in forest and hill biomes. The easier version is to find a wild Munchlax, which is a much more common spawn than Snorlax, and then catch it in a friend ball. A friend ball will cause a Pokemon to start with 150 base friendship. In Cobblemon, friendship Pokemon like Munchlax only need 160 friendship to evolve. So then just raise its level a few times by battling or with rare candies, and pretty soon you'll have the option to evolve Munchlax into Snorlax, and you can have this bad boy on your team. Monet asked, how do I get Applin in Cobblemon? Applin doesn't spawn in vanilla Cobblemon, so you'll need the Aldemon's data pack installed. Then Applin is a rare spawn in any forest biome. You'll have to keep a sharp eye out so you don't miss it because it's very small. Ryan asked, what are the best add-ons for Cobblemon? These are my top 3 favorite Cobblemon add-ons. The first one is the Aldemon's mod. This mod adds just about every legendary and mythical Pokemon possible in Cobblemon. Next up is the Radical Cobblemon Trainers mod, which adds gym leaders and trainers. And coming in at number 3 is the Cobblemon Rider mod, which allows you to ride on Pokemon in Cobblemon. Potato asked how to get Milotic in Cobblemon. First, you'll need to get Feebas. Now, Feebas can only be found by fishing in a slime chunk with a lure level of at least level 1. You'll also need a Prism Scale, which can likewise be found fishing. Then, if you right-click your Feebas and give it the Prism Scale to hold, and then right-click it with a link cable, it will have the option to evolve into Milotic, and then you can just evolve it like any normal Pokemon in Cobblemon, and you get this awesome Pokemon on your team. Freshier asked how to get King Gambit in Cobblemon. King Gambit isn't in vanilla Cobblemon yet, so you'll need the Aldemon's data pack installed. First, you'll need a Bisharp or Pawniard, which spawn in bamboo forests. Then once you have a Bisharp, you have to knock out 3 other Bisharp with your own Bisharp. This can be a bit of a long process, but it's definitely going to be worth the wait. Then if you level up your Bisharp, you should be able to evolve it into King Gambit. Tonight asked, how can I get Tornadus, Landorus, and Thundurus in Cobblemon? First, you need the Aldemon's data pack enabled. Then Tornadus and Thundurus are actually both ultra rare spawns in plains biomes, and they have these awesome flexing animations. Landorus is an ultra rare spawn in savanna biomes. Amber asked, how do you get the paradox of the 3 legendary dogs in Cobblemon? First, you need the Aldemon's data pack enabled. Then Raging Bolt is an ultra rare spawn in coastal biomes. Walking Wake is an ultra rare spawn in mountain biomes during the day. And Gouging Fire is supposed to be an ultra rare spawn in plains biomes, but in all my experience, it hasn't spawned correctly in the game. So I'm not sure if that's a system bug or just a me bug. The Fearless asked, how do you get Manaphy in Cobblemon? First, you need the All the Mons data pack installed. Then Manaphy is an ultra rare spawn in Oceans, but only if you are fishing with a lure level of at least level 2 or higher. Eddie asked how to get Druddigon in Cobblemon. Druddigon doesn't spawn in vanilla Cobblemon, so first you'll need the All the Mons data pack installed. Then Druddigon is a rare spawn in mountain biomes. SZ asked how do I get Riolu in Cobblemon. Riolu spawns in mountain biomes and is slightly more common at night. If you want to evolve it into Lucario, you need to get its friendship to 160. I highly recommend catching him in a friend ball, which will start its base friendship at 150, and then you can use a Kelpsy berry or some other berries to raise it the rest of the way. Or just level it up a few times in battle and you should get to high enough friendship to evolve it into Lucario. Rick asked how you can get a trade evolution Pokemon in a single player world. Cobblemon introduces an item called the Link Cable. This can be found in villages and other chests, or you can craft it with an Ender Pearl, 2 copper ingots, and 2 pieces of Nether Quartz. If you right click a trade evolution Pokemon, like Haunter with the Link Cable, it will give you the opportunity to evolve it even though you didn't physically trade it. Joseph asked how to get Blackafalon in Cobblemon. This is one of the harder Ultra Beasts to come by. It's not in vanilla Cobblemon, so first you'll need the All the Mons data pack installed. Then it's an ultra rare spawn and Nether Desert biomes, but it has to be below Y level 127. I do think they did an awesome job with its floating head though. Freddy asked how to get Cresselia in Cobblemon. First you need the All the Mons data pack installed. Then Cresselia is an ultra rare spawn in floral biomes. Axolotl Games asked how do you get Lileep and Anorith in Cobblemon. There are 2 main ways to get Anorith or Lileep in Cobblemon. First, they are both ultra rare spawns in lush cave biomes, just like any other fossil Pokemon. Or you can find their fossils at dig sites and use a restoration machine on them. I recommend fossil sites in dripstone caves for Anorith, and hydrothermal vents or sandy dens for Lileep. And then if you level them up, you can evolve them into Armaldo and Cradily. Rextifer asked how to get Noivern in Cobblemon. Noivern doesn't spawn in vanilla Cobblemon, so first you'll need the All the Mons data pack installed. Then Noibat spawns in any biome with the spooky tag during night. I found one of the easiest ones to look for is dark forest biomes. Then if you level up Noibat to level 48, it can evolve into Noivern, who will look just like this. Definitely one of my favorite added designs. Flurzify asked how to get Jinx in Cobblemon. Jinx spawns in any biome with the freezing tag, so anything like glacial peaks or frozen oceans are a great place to look. iPsych asked how do I get Rotom in Cobblemon. First you need the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Rotom is a rare spawn when you are in close proximity to a PC, fossil restoration machine, or pretty much any kind of redstone block. If you want Rotom's different forms, you can right-click Rotom with a data monitor, and you can evolve it into one of its different forms depending on the biome you're in. So since I'm near water, I can evolve it into Rotom Wash, but if you don't want that one, you can right-click it with the same item, and this will reverse the process, and then you can go ahead and try in a different biome for one of its other forms. Mago asked, how do I get Zarude in Cobblemon? First, you need the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Zarude is an ultra-rare spawn in jungle biomes when light levels are between 8 and 15. He also looks kind of terrifying. Zorua asked, how do you get Mimikyu in Cobblemon? First, you need the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Mimikyu is a rare spawn in any biome with the spooky tag, when light levels are between 8 and 15. I've found the simplest place to look is dark forest biomes. Enix asked how to get Lycanroc in Cobblemon. First, you need the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Rockruff is a common spawn in mountain biomes. You can then evolve it into normal Lycanroc at level 25. Who looks like this in Cobblemon. If you want Lycanroc's midnight form, you can just evolve it at nighttime, and this thing looks epic. Also, if you want Lycanroc's dusk form, you have to evolve Rockruff immediately as it begins to be night, so when it is dusk. This makes it a lot easier to get the dusk form because you don't actually have to get the own tempo ability like the normal games. Starfleet asked how to get a Pokemon's hidden ability in Cobblemon. There are 2 items in Cobblemon that can change abilities. The ability Capsule can change a Pokemon's ability to its other standard ability, which is useful, but this doesn't change to its hidden ability. If you want a Pokemon's hidden ability, you need to right click them with the ability patch. For example, this gives my Greninja Protein. But unfortunately, these items are not craftable yet in vanilla Cobblemon, so there are 2 main ways to get them. There's a mod linked in the description that allows you to craft these items, and I believe the Radical Red mod has them as rewards for certain battles. Youngbug asked, how do you get Axew in Cobblemon? Axew currently doesn't spawn in vanilla Cobblemon, so you'll need the All the Mons data pack installed. Then Axew is just an uncommon spawn in mountain biomes. Then you can evolve it into Fracture at level 38, and finally into Haxorus at level 48. Walker asked how to get Hoopa Unbound in Cobblemon. Hoopa doesn't spawn in vanilla Cobblemon, so first you'll need the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Hoopa only spawns in end cities, so you have to be in an end city, and it will only spawn on Purple Block, Purple Pillar, or Endstone Brick. Then if you want Hoopa Unbound, you have to right click it with a Totem of Undying, and then you have the opportunity to evolve Hoopa into Hoopa Unbound, who is absolutely massive. Steve asked how to get Fluttermane and Cobblemon. First, you need the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Fluttermane is a rare spawn in any biome with the spooky tag during the day. I found the best one to hunt in is Deep Dark. Ricardo asked, what's the best Cobblemon mod pack? That depends a little on your preference, but I'll give my opinion. I think the best mod pack needs legendaries. I think it definitely requires gym battles and other features like riding on Pokemon that aren't yet added in vanilla Cobblemon. You can go to pocketcraft.net and click on mod packs to see a list of some of my favorite mod packs, or you can click the link in the description for my own mod pack that I use in the survival guide series. The Reaper asked how to get Ash-Greninja and Cobblemon. First, you'll need the Mega Showdown mod enabled. Then you'll need to craft Ash's cap using red wool, green wool, and white wool. You need to get your Greninja to 250 friendship. The fastest way to do this is with berries. Qualla and Kelpsy berries work great. Then you need to right click Greninja with Ash's cap and it will give it the ability Battle Bond. Then you need to enter a battle with a trainer that has more than one Pokemon and knock out its first Pokemon with a damaging move. Once you do that, Battle Bond ability will activate. You'll get this awesome animation here, and Greninja will turn into Ash-Greninja. You can see this awesome water shuriken on its back, and it will continue like this for the rest of the battle, but once you finish the battle here, it's going to immediately revert to normal Greninja. Travis asked how to get Absol and Cobblemon. Absol is a rare spawn in vanilla Cobblemon. It spawns naturally in snowy forests, taiga, and mountain biomes. If you want to get Mega Absol, you'll need the Mega Showdown mod enabled. Then you'll need to give Absol the Absolite to hold, which can be found in special structures underground. Then you can right click Absol with a Mega Bracelet and it will turn into Mega Absol. Top Games asked how to get Toxel and Cobblemon. First, you need the All the Mons data pack enabled. Then Toxel actually has a really interesting spawn condition. It's actually only an uncommon spawn, so it's not too difficult to find, except it can only spawn near a pasture block, similar to Porygon and PCs. If you place a bunch of pasture blocks all around your base, you should be able to find a Toxel pretty soon. But this only works in the overworld, it doesn't spawn in the Nether or End. Then if you level up Toxel to level 30, you can evolve it into Toxtricity, who looks like this in Cobblemon. Side account asked how to find ultra rare Pokemon in Cobblemon. By design, ultra rare Pokemon are going to be pretty hard to find, but there are a couple of things you can do to make the process a little bit easier. I recommend building a platform super high in the sky. Now you want this platform to be pretty huge. About 60 blocks by 60 blocks is a pretty good size. Then you want to give yourself a pretty good sword, and anytime a Pokemon spawns that's not the Pokemon you want, just take it out with a sword. This will help cycle through the spawns more quickly. You can knock them out with your own Pokemon if you want to be more humane, but a sword is much faster. If you do this for an hour or two, you should get an ultra rare Pokemon to show up. However, there's a really important caution. Make sure to either check the Cobblemon wiki or watch one of my guides on how to find the specific Pokemon you're looking for, or at a minimum use the PokéNav mod, because certain Pokemon can't spawn at certain Y levels, so they may not spawn in a sky platform. If you happen to be hunting one of those Pokemon that can only spawn lower underground, or you don't really want to do a sky platform, there's kind of one main strategy you can do. You can't change the odds of finding a Pokemon without changing the code, but I often say the best way to catch an ultra rare Pokemon is just to keep yourself entertained so you don't quit searching for it, and then you'll find it pretty easily. So I always recommend picking the biome the Pokemon spawns in, and then starting a couple projects there. Build Cool House or a Pokemon Center, train up your Pokemon to level 100, mine for resources, or do something that takes time like that, but is also fun and beneficial to your world, and you should find an ultra rare Pokemon just while you're doing that. Thank you so much for watching all 100 days. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out my Cobblemon survival guide linked right here, where I teach you absolutely everything you need to know about Cobblemon.